and sort of the vision that we have for the portal, why we created it and what we want it to be. And then I'll hand it over to Tomasz, who will give a live demonstration of how to navigate the portal and find resources there, and also talk a little bit about sort of the journey that our evidence database is currently making towards being what we call an evidence portal, which is something that presents evidence in a much more usable way for most users than a traditional database. And so we'll talk more about that. And it'd be useful to hear your thoughts on how this might be applicable to what DMEO is doing in terms of building internal resources and that kind of thing. So, like I said, I'm going to talk a bit about the motivations and our vision for the evidence portal. And I want to start by just noting just the kind of overwhelming number of different resources that exist out there if you want to find rigorous research about global development or about the effects of social and economic policies and programs. And so, there are different journals, there are different organizations publishing research, there are different databases, some specialized, some general. So if you're wanting to keep track of what's going on in your field and what are the latest findings, what does the latest research says, traditionally, you have to go to just dozens of different sources trying to find the information that you need, and it can leave you kind of puzzled about, okay, where can I go in this sort of jungle, this maze of different producers and different types of evidence, and so where can I find just what I'm looking for that tells me, what evidence exists on this policy or program, or what evidence exists about what are the most effective ways to influence change on a particular outcome that we're interested in, and how can I find the evidence that's most contextually relevant in the context when I'm working, and how can we access that information in a way that doesn't require reading a few dozen academic research papers or even worse 80-page institutional reports. That's kind of the challenge that we know people are facing. They need that kind of quick access to reliable evidence, but aren't always sure where to go to get that. So what our kind of vision is, we want to imagine a world where there's a place where all of the most recent evidence is captured, and you would be able to trust that the content of that place, the research presented there and the evidence presented there, because someone has looked at it and verified its quality. That research is really easy to find, and it's easy to access all of it. So not only is it collected there, but you know how to get to exactly what you need. And the findings from the research are clearly presented in a way that makes it pretty clear how you can use that evidence in your context. So that's our vision, and our attempt to create this world where something like this exists, at least for the global development space, is 3I's Development Evidence Portal. And so this is, it's partly current reality, that the evidence portal is a place that does all these things, and it's partly our vision for the future. So we'll be talking a bit about where we started, where we are now, and where we're hoping to get to in the future. But we do think that even though it's not all the way towards what we would like it to be, we think it's a really great resource, and there's just a wealth of information there, and lots of different ways you can explore it to try to find research and evidence that's relevant to your questions. So I want to talk a little bit about how we populate the content of the evidence portal. And so we are looking for research that speaks to the effectiveness of particular interventions, so like a policy or a program, on particular outcomes that are of interest. So we go out and try to find all of the research that speaks to those kinds of questions in low and middle income country contexts. So we do a broad literature search, and we've built a strategy for searching different sources with an expert in database searching, a librarian who specializes in this. We search a number of scholarly databases that index journals, and we also search a number of sources of what we call gray literature, or literature that's not published through traditional academic publishers or indexed in the traditional databases. So these will be things like government and institutional reports, and things like that that may not be in those databases, but can have really valuable information, and are not necessarily subject to some of the publishing biases in terms of what ends up in the journals. So we think it's important to cover that. And so we do this monthly. This is a new kind of innovation that we've introduced this year. So previously, we just updated the content of the development evidence portal every 2 years or so. And so that meant at any given time, the content of the development evidence portal was maybe 1 to 2 years out of date, didn't have all the latest research. But we've realized that it's important to keep capturing the research as soon as it's published. So we're now going, and rather than doing really big updates every couple of years, doing these small updates and going out and finding this research every month, so we can add it to the portal as soon as possible after it's released, and so that the portal always is up to date and has the most recent evidence. Once we conduct these searches, we screen the search results for eligibility. So we have a team of trained staff members and consultants who work with us, who know exactly what we're looking for in the evidence portal, and so identify studies that meet the following criteria. So we're looking for studies that present evidence from one or more low or middle income countries, and is one of the study types that we include. So these are impact evaluations. So we're looking for quantitative causal studies of the impact of a particular program or policy, or a systematic review that assesses effectiveness. And usually those systematic reviews will be built from the impact evaluations. So we're looking for those two types of studies. And we're looking for impact evaluations, ones that use an eligible method. And these are methods that we have identified as providing a good basis for causal inference. So being able to make a reasonably confident assessment that it's not just a matter of correlation, that people who were exposed to this policy or program saw a change in a particular outcome, that it was not other factors, but the fact that they were exposed to the policy or program that made the difference. And so these methods may be familiar to many of you, but here is our list. So we use randomized or experimental studies, but we also include a range of quasi-experimental designs. And so you can see the list here. And so we, our search strategy is designed to pick up studies that use any of these methods, and our screeners are trained to recognize the use of any of these methods, which can, under the right circumstances and when the assumptions underlying these methods are met, they can provide us with confidence that we've actually identified the impact of the program. So every study that makes it into the evidence portal, we think, can make a plausible claim that they're identifying a causal relationship between the implementation of a program or policy and its effects on constituents or participants. And once we've gone through and assessed studies against those criteria and identified the ones that meet those criteria of coming from a lower middle income country, being an impact evaluation or systematic review, and using an eligible design. We do critical appraisals of each study and give them a confidence rating. And so for systematic reviews, our ratio of impact evaluations to systematic reviews in the evidence portal is about 10 to 1. So there are about 10 impact evaluations for every systematic review. And so for systematic reviews, we have much lower volumes, so we're able to do a pretty comprehensive and detailed assessment of the methods and assign each systematic review a confidence rating. Say we have low, medium, or high confidence in the results of or the findings of that systematic review based on the methods they used and how they match up with what we know to be sort of universally recognized best practices for producing unbiased and complete assessments of the evidence in a systematic review. For impact evaluations, because the volume is so much larger, we're unable to do these detailed, comprehensive assessments of methods. But we do, and this is, again, a new innovation that we've just introduced this year. We've done the critical appraisals of systematic reviews for many years. We're just introducing this quick assessment of the key methodological features for each impact evaluation. So for each impact evaluation, we look at, okay, what design did they use? Was it randomized? Did they do a difference in differences, regression discontinuity, some sort of matching procedure? And we say, okay, what are the assumptions that underlie that approach to causal inference or identifying causal relationships? And do the authors present some evidence that these assumptions were met? And how good is the evidence that they present? So we're able to say for each one, okay, based on the most important kind of methodological features of this study, do they address the kind of most important threats to the validity of using this design to identify causal relationships? And so just as an example, there's a really large literature. It's very well established that one of the biggest threats to randomized designs, so randomized controlled trials, is attrition and differential attrition in particular. So if you have you start out with a really large sample in both your treatment group and your control group, but you have a lot more people just drop out of the study. They stop showing up to participate in the intervention. You can't find them for follow-up surveys, and so you have large attrition perhaps in the treatment group, but not in the control group. That's a serious threat to being able to use the data from the randomized study to make a causal inference. And so for randomized studies, that's one of the key things that we assess. Do they clearly report how much attrition there was? And is it able, or is the reader able to determine, yes, there was relatively low differential attrition in this study, or was it relatively high? So that's just kind of an example of the kind of assessment that we give to each study, so that we're able to say, based on this rapid assessment, our kind of preliminary judgment is that we should have low, medium, or high confidence in the causal estimates that are presented in terms of the impact of that program or policy on the beneficiaries. And once we've identified the studies that are either high or medium confidence, so either impact evaluations or systematic reviews that meet those thresholds, we do a exercise of collecting detailed information about each study. So like where it was conducted, what the interventions assessed and the outcomes measured were, what were the methods used, all that kind of thing. And we make all that information available on the evidence portal. And so my colleague Tomasz is going to walk you through how that works, how it looks, and how to navigate it. So I'm going to turn it over to him. But before we do that, I just would like to give a few minutes see if anyone has any questions about what I've presented about the vision for the evidence portal and how we populate it.
Do we have any questions as of now? Or should we wait till the presentation is done? We can take the questions soon after Thomas's presentation is done.
Yeah, we thought we'd give a few minutes after each kind of section of the presentation in case there are any burning questions, but we're also happy to take them all at the end.
Okay, sure. I think people want to ask the questions at the end of the presentation. So if you can move ahead with the presentation.
Okay, great. So with that, I will turn it over to Tomasz. Thanks very much. Tomasz, you're on mute.
Can you hear me now? Sorry. Great. And sorry for that. And you can also see my screen with the evidence portal, right? But yes, great. Fantastic. So as Mark shown in his slide, basically this is how the how our portal looks when you kind of first come to it. And basically now I was thinking to kind of give you a demonstration of a practical research question you might want to have, especially now in these current times where potentially you know, the post-COVID time where you might be interested in exploring any evidence on potentially one outcome that seems to be of interest to many people, which is the micronutrient status of different populations, and to do that, you would click on the taxonomy of interventions and outcomes hyperlink, which is a new feature which we've just added a few weeks ago, and it allows you to basically look at all the kind of interventions and outcomes that we have in our taxonomy to make sure that you basically only find studies that you want. And in this case, maybe this is not an intervention that you're looking for, but is more an outcome that potentially could be impacted by many different interventions. So, in this search box at the top, I will probably untick intervention. Well, first I'll just put micronutrient in the text box. Let's say I'm not interested in any particular sector. I'm just interested in any micronutrient, actually in outcomes. I'm not interested in interventions. I'm only interested in outcomes. I want to go very broad and to see what interventions are out there. So after clicking on search, what I can see that there are two outcomes popping up that meet the query. One of them is measures of micronutrient intake. The other one is micronutrient status. I can look at the definitions of each of them, and assuming that I'm interested in only in the micronutrient status and I'm not interested in the intake, and I look at the definition, it suits what I'm looking for, then I would just make sure I note down the name, micronutrient status. I go back to the main page. I open the advanced search. In the advanced search, I look for the outcome value, and I put in micronutrient. So I basically have put in a query. I want to look for any studies where the outcome is micronutrient status. I click on search, and out of the 9,800 records, I suddenly get 340. So that means we've got 340 impact evaluations and systematic reviews that measure this outcome. But you probably are interested only in evidence that comes from India, right? So let me just filter through India. When I click on India, I get 51 studies that are that have been conducted in India. I can further narrow it down to, let's say, the last 5 years, and just to look at those, assuming that I'm only interested in the most recent studies, I would get 17 of them. If I open the intervention filter, I will be able to see what types of interventions have been studied, right? So out of all those 17 results that meet the criterion of having an outcome of micronutrient status being conducted in India between the years of 2016 and 2020, I can see that nutrient fortification in foods is by far the most studied intervention with 9 studies. Then we've got nutrition education and behavior change with 4 studies, nutrient supplementation with 3 studies, and then there's just 1 study for other more kind of less common interventions. And if I wanted to, I can just click on any of those and look at the studies to see what those are. I could open one of them and have some more metadata in terms of that could be potentially useful for me, describing the program in more detail, and for systematic reviews also describing the confidence level. If I'm interested, I could also look at the other outcomes that have been measured in the study. So we can see that apart from micronutrient status outcomes, the same studies, 8 of them measure anemia, 6 of them measure weight. And if I wanted to, I can just quickly find those studies by using those filters. So this is what you can do currently. If you search for another combination, another outcome, it might as well be that there would not have been that many results. For example, food security is quite a reasonably well studied area, but if there are some areas which might not result in much evidence, in those cases it could be that there will be just not much evidence you could base your decisions on, and maybe that would be a reason for you to possibly commissioning a new impact evaluation in the area. So this is where we are, but in the future, where I'm going to go next is to where we are going. Like we are trying to make this, to move away as much as we can from having people look at studies into to kind of a more elaborate ways of showcasing evidence in a different way. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to go back and share with you the slides. To look where we are going and the journey that we have been taking. We've heard from Aditya that you should be seeing my screen right now with the part 3 with the title, which describes the journey from an evidence database to an evidence portal that we are at 3IE undertaking, and yeah, we just wanted to share with you some of our experiences because we thought they could be relevant in light of DMEO's also kind of in your portal that you are also investing in. So I'm going to start with basically this evidence infrastructure pyramid, which many people talk about, is basically a pyramid of the how evidence is being brokered from the bottom to the top. The more the up you go, the more evidence has been translated. So at the bottom, you've got the data, and you've got the studies that rely on the data. You've got the primary studies. Then you've got the systematic reviews that rely on the studies. Going even further, we've got the databases and evidence maps that basically help you to find the studies that you're looking for and display them in a way, sometimes very creative way. But actually, what I wanted to just focus on today is mostly on the fact that we really, I mean, there's an increasing push to go beyond that, of not just creating databases and products that showcase research, but more in kind of making sure that policymakers and practitioners who do not read academic journals, right? We know that that they would be able to get the recommendations and so that research could be put into use without them having to look at the papers. So the biggest kind of the biggest step that I wanted to focus on today is how to move on from the databases, like, for example, the Epistemonikos database of health evidence, or the ERIC database of education evidence, how to move to the a LOVE evidence portal that Epistemonikos have created, or potentially and teaching and learning toolkit that have been created by Education Endowment Foundation. And I'll talk a little bit more about those examples and what they bring. So we're not going to talk much about guidelines and checklists. They go even further. So you've got evidence portals, guidelines, checklists. They all are kind of helping the decision maker to make decisions without looking at the research paper, but they differ in terms of how much agency they give to the decision maker. So for evidence portal, the decision maker still needs to make a decision by themselves, whereas the guidance kind of recommends different actions, and the checklist basically tells us do this, do that, presents a ready to do list. So today we're going to focus only on the move between database and evidence portal. So one of the examples of how this has been implemented in the education sector is the Teaching and Learning Toolkit by the Education Endowment Foundation, which basically presents evidence on 34 most common, kind of widely used interventions. For example, one-to-one tuition, and it presents them across three simple metrics, right? First one is cost. Second one is reliability of the evidence, the strength of evidence, or as it's presented here, evidence security. Basically, how much do we trust the evidence that the effect can be attributed to the intervention? And finally, the effect itself, which is presented in a very simple way as months of impact. Basically, it's not being shown as it usually is in studies where you have an effect size, which is very difficult to interpret for people who are not researchers. So what this toolkit did is they basically translated this into what it actually boils down to is like how much additional progress a child makes if it is exposed to an intervention. So in this case, if you have +5, that means, I think +5, this is for one-to-one tuition, for example. At the very bottom, you see that it costs quite a lot, $4 out of $5. The strength of evidence is quite high, and that intervention is giving children on average 5 additional months of progress. It is not, as you might see, it is not the most cost-effective intervention, and basically it's not the best buy, because when you look at it, child feedback is a much better buy because it only costs $1 out of $5, and it gives us 8 additional months of impact. which seems like a really good thing to do for a policymaker who has very limited resources. We can see maybe that the strength of evidence is not as high as for one-to-one intuition, but is reasonably strong. So that's basically an example of how this can be used and is being used in the education sector. This is now being translated in the West African context. There's a project coming up that will have this translated for that particular context. But this has started with I think English-speaking countries first, and high-income countries. The second example here is the Love platform, which Epistemonicus created, and it has been used for COVID-19, but not only. And in this case, it allows users to browse the evidence by not only the usual kind of metadata like years of publication, sectors, or like abstract title, keywords, but they've also kind of extracted metadata on interventions and populations targeted, which allows users to construct queries that help them to find the evidence quicker. They don't need to look at all the title and abstract stuff and go through it, but they can just find evidence much quicker. They can also ask them to ask the Love platform or Epistemonicus to conduct scoping reviews for them, which is a paid service. But in any case, this is also a step in the direction of an evidence portal. And my final example is basically our own 3IE development evidence portal, which is also on this journey, right? So we've got this part which is researcher friendly. We've got the advanced search, which allows people to conduct sophisticated queries to find what they need. But we also have, to the left, we've got filters that are more practitioner friendly and allow users to browse the evidence filtered by not only title and abstract, study type or year, but also sectors, World Bank themes, OECD DAC codes, sustainable development goals, but most importantly, interventions and outcomes. And what it does, it provides links to rigorous reviews and primary studies, as Mark has mentioned, that have been critically appraised, at least to some degree, that have some summaries in here that you can access, and have been also further translated by the portal manager to make it more accessible. And most importantly, I wanted just to showcase this latest change, this taxonomy of interventions of outcomes that we've launched recently, and we would love to hear whether it meets our expectations and potentially how it can be improved. Is basically how we so we kind of we are defining. It's not just a database. We're kind of creating a whole range. It really took us a whole year last year to basically figure out all the types of interventions, not just in one sector, but in a variety of sectors. And it took a while to come up with. I think we have about 1,400 different interventions and a similar amount of outcomes that we had to create definitions for, and then have coders extract the data for. So this is now live. This is ready for use, and we would really love to kind of get the message out there and have as many people use it as possible to basically conduct research quicker, but also for policymakers, decision makers, practitioners to get the information that they need with a few clicks. And all of this obviously comes with lots of caveats. It costs quite a lot of money to do, not only money but also expertise, and partnerships are really crucial in implementing this. So whatever solution DMEO is thinking where to go next, I just wanted you guys to be aware of that. You probably are already, but if there are any questions, if there's anything we can do to help you on your evidence journey, do let us know.
Thank you so much, Mark and Thomas, for the presentation. So we have one question as of now. So there's a question by Priyanka. Priyanka, would you like to ask a question yourself? I know you have typed your question on the chat window, but would you like to ask a question, or should I just take it on your behalf?
Sure, Aditya. My network is slightly weak, but my question is mainly along the lines of if the evidence portal also includes studies that have been conducted by various ministries or international governments.
So that's a great question. Basically, our rule is if it's an impact evaluation, of the way that we define those of using, those methods that we've identified as eligible, and it was conducted in a lower middle income country, then we want to include it. Our goal would be to include every one of those, impact evaluations that are conducted by ministries or governments. The trouble is, those do tend to be a lot more difficult to find than things that are published in traditional academic journals. So I don't know if we have a ready way to identify them, but I feel pretty confident saying, that there definitely are some impact evaluations there that were conducted by country governments or particular ministries within those governments. Exactly how many there are, I'm not sure, but our goal would be to include them. And so I would definitely encourage you, if you know of particular evaluations, go see if you can find them there. And if they're not there, then if you know where they can be found online, there may be ways that we can tweak our search strategies so that we're capturing more of those. Because again, they're really important to complement the stuff that's published, by academic researchers in the traditional kind of journal and database system, to capture these evaluations that come from different sources and may have a different perspective. So I would encourage you to look around for some, and then if there are some that that exist that are not there, we'd love to know where they can be found.
Sure, I think that would be really helpful.
Do you have any more questions? I think Shreyoshi, you had a question.
Actually, no, thank you so much. And thank you for this amazing presentation as well. I did not really have a question. It was a technical error through which my hand was showing raised. So no question from my end. Thank you. Very helpful dashboard, and would love to use and probably get back to you once we've started using it. Maybe that's when the questions will go in.
Okay, thanks, Shreyoshi. Do we have questions from anyone? Okay, by the time people make up their mind if they have any questions regarding the dashboard. So I had a quick question on the way through which the 3IE team managed to go through volumes of paper, trying to create a query-based platform for something like evaluation methods. So you did mention about how you have categorized your papers based on the different econometric methods used in those papers. So just wanted to know, how did you go about this, and how and besides this, there's one more question regarding the effectiveness of the intervention. So how did you really measure the effectiveness of the interventions? These are the two questions that I had. Thank you.
Okay, and just to clarify on your first question, was the question about, how did we identify this set of study designs as the ones that we wanted to include, or was it, once we'd identified these are the types of studies we want to include, how did we, sift through the literature, to find those?
What I exactly wanted to understand was like for you, for example, you mentioned how you have managed to identify and categorize the papers under the broad categories of regression, discontinuity, or difference in difference methods, and RCTs. So it must have entailed some amount of exploration of the papers and the methods used in these papers. So how exactly did you go about this?
Yeah, so there's sort of three components to that. So one is kind of at the searching phase. So in our search strategy, the keywords that we're using when we go to search these different databases and websites that we look at, there are terms, corresponding to all of these different methods, and we've, looked at how they're described and, different synonyms that might be used to describe what is essentially the same design, and tried to include as many of those different synonyms and ways they might be described as we can, try to make sure that we're capturing as many of them in our raw search. That's, probabilistic. These terms might be used in other ways to describe other things that have nothing to do with these experimental or quasi-experimental designs. So then at the screening stage, we are having our trained screeners look at the paper. There's one stage where they just look at the abstract and try to make their best judgment about whether it might be included. And then if it looks like it might potentially be eligible based on the abstract, then we'll retrieve the full text of the paper, and someone will read the method section and say, does this qualify? Is this on our list of eligible study designs? And so it's just a human-driven process for the most part. We do use machine learning within the software we use to manage like all the search results and screening those, that once we feed it some data about which things are included and which things are not, based on the abstracts, can help us sift through and find the ones that are more likely to be included. But that's just based on kind of all of the different eligibility criteria. So we don't know whether it's zeroing in specifically on the methods or anything like that. So it's primarily assessing whether it uses an eligible method is just someone reads the paper and makes that judgment. And then for the studies that do meet all of the eligibility criteria and are included, there's this additional stage of data extraction. And that's where we characterize the interventions, the outcomes, which country it was conducted in, what sector it's from, which SDGs it's related to. And then one of the things that the person reading the study and cataloging all of this information will look at is, okay, what are the methods? We know it's going to be on this list, but which one is it? So that's the whole kind of process of identifying those studies and classifying them. So does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. A colleague of mine, Shweta, has been having some technical issues. So she had a similar question on the overview of the development process. So how long did it take you guys to, compile the documents, source the documents and compile them, and then categorize them? So if you could just as I mentioned earlier, so DMEO is trying to do something along these lines because we are in the process of revamping our website. So your comments on this would be really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. So the evidence portal, it's precursor. We used to have separate ones for impact evaluations and systematic reviews, but the kind of precursor was launched in 2013, and we've been kind of trying to update it ever since. But probably the most relevant thing to describe is the update that we've been doing this year. So it was last updated in 2017, and then this year in 2021 we are updating to find all of those studies that were published since then, and also implementing this surveillance system, so to capture all of the studies that are published throughout this year as well. Yeah, given the volume, it's been a long process, so we're just kind of wrapping up the update in which we have identified about 5,000 to 6,000 new impact evaluations, so it's pretty much taken the 9 months this year so far to develop and refine the search strategy, conduct the searches, process all the results. And I mean, we over the course of the year, we've retrieved, I think a couple 100,000 different search results because we're using a really broad search to try to capture everything that's out there. So if you had a much more constrained kind of search where you're only looking, in specific sources or looking for things on a particular topic or specific to a particular context, like just studies from India, this could probably be done in a few months. If you had a team that kind of, was, well trained and that kind of thing. But that's it's definitely, months, not weeks at the minimum. And that's, kind of once we already had, in mind what are all of the things that we want to include. We kind of knew what the inclusion criteria would be and what kinds of studies we were interested in finding. So of course, you need to leave in some time to develop that kind of framework or like a screening protocol that says, here's what's in, here's what's out, all of that kind of thing.
Okay, thank you. So we have a question from Anisha. It's on the chat window. If you could take that, please.
Yeah, sure. So for anyone who doesn't see, can you give insight on what are the criteria you're using to mark the confidence criteria for the various papers published? So for the systematic reviews, when we assess those papers, we are looking at how comprehensive was their search. So did they clearly report their search strategy and tell us, and can we determine that yes, there probably isn't a lot of evidence that they that it's out there that they missed because they just didn't search in the right places. And Tomasz has posted a link to our systematic review criteria checklist, so you can check that out. But I'll summarize it here. So we look at the search strategy to see, was it comprehensive? We look at the way that they did their screening to identify eligible studies. Did they do it in a way that was likely to reduce kind of bias and error? When they went to analyze their results, whether they did a kind of quantitative analysis, a meta-analysis of the different studies, or a kind of narrative approach to synthesizing, did they do that in a way that kind of gave more weight to the studies that sort of deserved more weight because they were, conducted better or had larger sample sizes, that kind of thing. And do they present the findings in a way that's transparent and makes clear, these are the findings about which, there's we can be fairly confident. These things, we can be less confident because the studies that this is based on are of somewhat lower quality. So we look for those kinds of things in the systematic review. And like I said, it's a very detailed process. It takes several hours to do one of these assessments. For the impact evaluations, I'll have to defer someone on this question because we're just in the process of finalizing these criteria. Like I said, this is something new we're doing this year, and we have gone through an extensive process of looking at the research literature on all of these different methods and identifying what are their key assumptions. And we've been piloting this with the randomized studies. So I mentioned about attrition. Another one that is relevant to randomized studies is whether they use an intent to treat analysis. So that's the kind of things we've settled on so far. We are very shortly going to be posting, on our blog, a summary of the procedure that we took to develop these criteria for all of the different study designs, and presenting drafts of all of these criteria, because we would love to get input from the broader evaluation and research community about these. We think they're pretty are well grounded in the literature and can be reliably assessed, but we won't know until we get some feedback and try it out. So please keep an eye on our blog over the next couple of weeks, because we'll be posting the drafts of the criteria for all of the different study designs, and we'd love to hear some feedback.
Right. Thank you so much, Mark. Do we have any questions from the participants? Oh, so there's a question by Shreyoshi on the chat window.
Yeah, so Tomasz, do you want to take this one? I mean, I think it kind of speaks to the equity coding tool somewhat. So are you looking to add?
Yeah, somehow, yeah. So yeah, that's a good point, and I haven't mentioned that we are also. You can hear me, right? That we are capturing. Oh, there's a filter on the equity dimension, which is the basically not necessarily a population, but is a filter which helps to capture which kind of vulnerable groups have had their equity addressed in a study. So you could have a study to a general population, but they could do a subgroup analysis, for example, for along different scheduled castes or tribes, or and that could potentially be captured in the equity dimension filter. But I think what you're referring more to is the kind of a population filter, as I understand, which would give you more information about the target group, which is not always captured in the equity dimension, and that's something that by I Love platform does. If you remember the example I showed you, they have a population filter. And we've started organically creating such a filter for our evidence platform, and maybe at some point we will also publish it publicly. But for now, you have to do with the equity dimension filter, which is a good indication of which groups are being targeted, but it will not give you that maybe all the information that you could be interested in.
Thanks, Thomas. So we have one more question from Shweta. She's unfortunately continuing to have some technical issues. So her question is on whether you're planning to go beyond impact assessments and include other types of assessments like quick assessments, rapid assessments, as we do in India in a lot of the cases. And that is something that we also do at DMEO quite a lot. So would you also be including these kind of studies on your dashboard?
So it's something that we have talked a little bit about, but hasn't really been our focus. Our focus has mostly been on our specialization is in impact evaluation and evidence synthesis, kind of based on impact evaluation. And so that's our goal has been to build a platform that assembles all of that kind of evidence. And that's a big challenge in itself, and challenging to resource in certain ways, to secure ongoing funding for us to continually maintain it. And so yeah, the short answer is, I mean, I think that we're definitely always open to thinking about ways where we could expand, what kinds of evidence we're capturing. We are well aware that there's a lot of valuable evidence out there that doesn't come in the form of impact evaluations or systematic reviews. But that's kind of our specialty. We think that type of evidence is really important, so we kind of focus on that. But expanding beyond that is something we're not necessarily opposed to, but we'd have to think very carefully about and do really broad engagements on it, and so we'd be very early on in those stages. So no specific plans, but it's not something that we've definitively ruled out either.
Okay, thank you so much. So do we have any more questions? Or comments? So if I can, call upon Abhinash sir, Akhilesh sir, Shailendra sir, if you have any comments regarding the portal. I don't think there are any questions right now, but I suppose what we can do is we can go to the portal, and I hope we can write to you about our queries regarding the portal, how to use it, how to refine our searches, and try to look for specific impact evaluation reports pertaining to our research interests. Can we do that? Would that be possible?
Yes, absolutely. I'm just putting my email address in the chat so that everyone will have it. And if anyone doesn't take it down now, Aditya, please feel free to share widely with all your colleagues, and please feel free to write to us. We're always happy to hear from users.
Absolutely, that's great. So as I mentioned, so at DMEO, we are continuing to undertake a lot of monitoring and evaluation work. And with respect to our work, we have to do simultaneous evaluation of different projects. So we will definitely be using the portal. And it does seem to be really handy because of the query-based filters that we can use to systematically search through volumes of documents. And as Thomas mentioned, how we can go from databases to the evidences directly. So thank you so much for joining us. If you have any further comments, Mark and Thomas, please feel free to share them, or you're welcome to write to us and reach out to us at DMEO anytime.
Great, thanks very much. Likewise, this was a lot of fun. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mark. Thank you so much, Thomas. Have a nice day.
Thanks,
Thanks,
you too.
everyone.
Bye-bye.